Welcome to the second part of the lesson, We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together. In the last session, we've seen that one of the narrators, Gordon Cook, took his wife and two children on a round-the-world voyage to duplicate the voyage of Captain James Cook. The first part of their journey was smooth and enjoyable, but before entering the Indian Ocean, he took two sailors to help him navigate across the stormy sea. On January 2nd, they encountered bad weather. A giant wave smashed into their boat, Wave Walker, and caused severe damage. The narrator himself suffered injury but brought his boat under control. The biggest problem was to save the boat from sinking. This is where we have stopped in the last part. Now we will continue page number 15. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. So here the captain is struggling to stretch waterproof materials across the wide open holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the side. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with the debris floating around the cabins and the electric pump short circuited. So here they encountered two problems. The first one was their hand pumps started to get blocked. The second one, their electric pump short circuited and stopped functioning. The water level rose threateningly. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard, along with the forestay-sail, the jib, the dinghies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. I connected it to an outpipe and was thankful to find that it worked. So here again, using the electric pump, the narrator and his family and the other crew men were able to remain afloat. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our Mayday calls. They are the distress calls given by a ship to secure help from other ships nearby through a radio, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she replied, "I didn't want to worry you when you were trying to save us all." Here the narrator's daughter Sue, even though she was badly injured, she is trying to hide her pain and is trying her maximum to support her parents in their struggle to help them all or save them all. By morning on January 3rd, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest in rotation. But we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline, and on checking I found that nearly all the boat's main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. Keel is the steel structure along the base of the ship. In fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. The narrator, while checking for the source of a leak somewhere below the waterline, realizes that the strong steel structure along the base of the ship was completely destroyed and the starboard hull was supported by a few cupboard partitions. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but Wave Walker wouldn't hold it together long enough for us to reach Australia. I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them, Isle Amsterdam, was a French scientific base. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean, but unless the wind and seas abated, that is, become less intense, so we could hoist sail our chances would be slim indeed. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine, a secondary engine, out of action. While assessing the situation, the narrator clearly understood that he had to do something on an emergency basis, and with this boat he could not make it to Australia. So he checked the charts and calculated and found that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east, and there were research stations set up by the French. And those islands are termed as pinpricks in the vast ocean because there were tiny islands and they were so small that in the ocean they appear like tiny pinheads. On January 4, underline the date 4th January, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. We could not set any sail on the mainmast. Pressure on the rigging, that is the ropes which are tied to support the structure of a ship, would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. Mary found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. Now the situation seemed to be a bit better, and they just had to keep pace with the water entering into the boat. And after 2 days, they had their first meal. They somehow hoisted the storm jib and is heading towards the islands. But our respite, our relief was short-lived. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. Within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots and the seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate, that is, to get worsened throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5th, our situation was again desperate. The moment they thought that somehow the situation was manageable, the situation got worsened. The wind gained speed and the sea was getting higher. The weather deteriorated, and again they were back to square one, or they were back to the same condition that they were before. When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. "But Daddy," he went on, "we are not afraid to die. We aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together, you and Mummy, Sue and I." These are the most touching words in the lesson, I feel. When the narrator went to comfort the children, this is how they responded. Now, this actually gave the narrator more strength to work more vigorously to somehow save themselves from the situation. I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin, determined to fight the sea with everything I had. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves. Using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. Here you find the narrator's attempt to make an improvised sea anchor using nylon rope and paraffin. Paraffin is a colorless, flammable oil or a liquid. That evening, Mary and I sat together holding hands. As the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks, we both felt the end was very near. At this particular point of time, both the narrator and his wife realizes that the things have gone out of their hand and there is nothing much that they could do to survive this situation. So what they do is they both sit together holding hands and try to get the necessary mental strength to face the situation, whatever it be. But Wave Walker rode out the storm, and by the morning of January 6th, with the wind easing, I tried to get a reading on the sextant, that is, an instrument used for measuring angles and distances, It is used in navigation and surveying. Back in the chart room, I worked on wind speeds, changes of course, drift and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. So the ocean is vast and these islands are actually pinpricks in the vast ocean. While I was thinking, Sue, moving painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. On the front she had drawn caricatures. It's a picture in which a person's features are exaggerated to give a comic effect. Caricatures of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh?" I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message. "Oh, how I love you both." So this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. This is yet another inspiring gesture from the part of the children. This time it is Sue who comes forward with the caricature, and this simple act has touched both of them and they somehow wanted to save themselves from this difficult situation. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variation. I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m. I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees. If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel, he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. Then, with a heavy heart, I went below, climbed on my bunk, a narrow shelf-like bed, and amazingly dozed off, slept off. When I woke it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island, and with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. Here we can see the last attempt of the captain to somehow save his family and the other crewmen in the ship. He checked and rechecked his calculations and then finally adjusted everything so that it would enable them to reach the island by about 5 p.m. He was both mentally and physically tired, hence fell asleep. And when he woke up, he thought he would have definitely missed the island because it was already 6 p.m. This is the end of part 2. Thank you.